Hey everyone, this week's Skip Barber race is at Oran Park, track I've never done before except a couple laps in USF 2000. It seems like a pretty fun track for Skippy. We'll see how the racing goes on it. It's got a lot of tight curves, a lot of pretty fast corners, and just one straightaway that should be pretty interesting for passing. Um, this guide is looking at just basically default weather. The track's pretty cool at 23 degrees Celsius. The lap we're going to look at is a 1:13.663, which was my best after about 25 laps of practice here. And I expect that during the race we'll see definitely low 1:13s, probably in the high 1:12s. Turns out that I have a bent front wing, which is interesting on this track. There are a lot of high curbs and dips, so you can definitely take damage. So I haven't figured out my setup fully yet. That said, let's take a look at the lap. Whenever you see these track guides, you got to realize that we sort of cherry pick the best lap that we had. I think most important is to be consistent, right? And slightly slower lap time, but being able to repeat it over and over is way better than being able to throw down a 1:12 a single time and expect a good race after that. So consistency is way more important than the fastest laps. Now, the more consistent you are, your lap times are going to improve. That said, let's take a look. So you start the lap really long straightaway. Obviously, to get a good lap time, you have to finish the last lap pretty quick. So coming out of the last corner smoothly and quickly is going to get you a nice drive down the straightaway. So expect a lot of drafting over here. But then as we approach turn one, it's really tricky. It's fast, it's got a little bit of a camber, but you got to start sort of braking in there. So what do you do, especially in a pack? That's going to be very interesting. The key thing to look at here is the end of this pit wall. You sort of start turning in right at the end of the pit wall, still maintaining full throttle all the way to the first turn, but you start to lift slowly coming into the first corner. At least I do. If you snap the throttle too quickly, you're going to lose the back. So the lighter you can go on that, the better it is. And then you start braking kind of as soon as you pass the apex. You want to avoid the curb because it's going to even further unsettle the car there. And then what you want to do is try to maintain as much as possible straight line braking after turn one into turn two. So as you come through here, again, turn in sort of right at the end of that wall, going, start to lift here, avoiding that curb, and really applying the brakes just past that apex area, and counter steering to try to get yourself straightened out parallel to the side of the track and downshifting. This is a first gear corner. You really need to try to stay as settled as possible to get down in first gear. Blipping the throttle is a good idea here. Normally we don't do that in the Skippy too much, but under this braking and under this sort of sliding effect, you definitely want to try to blip a little bit to stabilize and match the revs so that you don't unsettle the car even more there. First gear into the turn, kind of turn in pretty early. Keep it really tight. It's you want to avoid the curb, but keeping it tight is going to be important to get on the throttle early. That way you can use as much of the track as possible. However, if you clip that curb, it's definitely going to push you wide, and some of these curbs being as high as they are, they're going to damage that front wing, so you got to be careful there. So we exit here. You can definitely use a lot of this outside curbing. I don't use too much. You do want to avoid the dirt. There are, one excess to be had up there. Avoid those. Shifting up to second, up to third on this straightaway. Pretty straightforward here. This may be a braking zone that you can pass under. We'll see. I haven't driven this with any competition, but I could see people trying to just duck in under you here. The break point here for me is I take a look at sort of this darker area just past the curb. I mean, that's sort of that X on the street, on the tarmac. That's about where I start to brake, and you're going to want to get down to first gear. Now, you don't have to brake too heavy, and you actually can get off the throttle pretty early and turn in and start to kind of coast in, so you don't necessarily have to trail brake all the way to the apex. as you approach that apex, again, keeping it super tight, stay off the curb, and get on the gas pretty early. You have pretty low speed here and a lot of width of the track to take advantage of to kind of get out of there hard. So up into second. This is one where I played back and forth, keeping it in second all the way to the next corner or upshifting into third. If you go into third, you only get like a second or two with it. I feel like it's maybe a little bit faster. You get a little bit more drive. Second, definitely you hit the rev limiter, but I could see it going either way, especially again, if you're driving with somebody else and you're drafting, you may get that extra gear or not. So sort of play with that and figure out what works best for you on a given lap. Again, we're here to race, so hot lapping is fun, but outside of qualifying, which is a whole different beast, because again, I cherry picked this lap, which is lap 21. I got warm tires, low gas, all this stuff. When you're going to qualify, you're going to have cold tires. It's going to be a completely different dynamic. That's it. As we approach this turn is very tricky, especially on cold tires. There's a nice dip here where the other configuration of the track kind of joins in. So you need to be as straight as possible sort of when you're going over that. Otherwise you risk a lot of oversteer, a lot of understeer, depending on which way you're facing at the time. So at this point we're in third gear, using these sort of green tires on the outside as a marker. That's when we start to slow down and drop it into second. Ideally, I like to get all my braking and shifting done before that drop down, so the car is as settled as possible. You're going to want to keep it, again, super tight to the inside curb, stay off the curb itself because it is a big one, and you can get on the throttle pretty hard and pretty quickly in second gear because you have a lot of space to exit this corner. Again, there's our dip. Unbalances the car, so you want to be done with your braking, you want to be done with your shifting at that point. Getting as close to the inside as possible. I do clip the curb a little bit, it's fine at that point, but any more than that would definitely unsettle the car and possibly risk wing damage. As we exit here, you don't have to go too wide, you're not going that fast, and you're going to just use a lot of track for no reason. Up to the white line, over the white line is good. Any more than that, you're really just wasting space getting out there. As we climb this hill, this is a blind corner, but it's really fun. The early laps, you're going to have to be careful because you're going to have colder tires, it's going to be slick. So those early laps, you do have to just lift a little bit to make this corner without ruining the exit on the outside. However, once the tires are up to temperature, and I'm thinking like lap 8, lap 7, maybe as early as 7, you can go full throttle through here, which makes it a lot faster. It being blind, you have to sort of think about and get some muscle memory into like, well, when do I turn in? Really, right about here is when I start turning in. So about 2 car lengths from the top of that hill, from the bridge, is really when you start turning in, and then you start aiming for that apex corner on the inside there, which you're going to take a bit of that curb. Not too much, again, curb is high, definitely can damage the wing depending on your setup. But once the tires are warm and up to temperature, up to pressure, we can take this full throttle, kind of clip that inside, really holding it, and ultimately you can use this outside concrete piece. It is a little bumpy, and if you have a bent wing, you'll notice the noise from it scraping. And that's why, again, sort of the previous corner at the bottom of the hill is vital because you do have a lot of speed that you're carrying and you want to maintain that speed up the hill. So as we approach here, this next section is really fun. It's fast. It doesn't require a lot of braking, but you have to have the right line through it to make sure that you can maintain optimal speed. So as we approach this corner, we're going to turn in probably about a car length from the red and yellow curb over there. Start turning in. You may graze the brake a little bit. I find that it's enough just to lift. You're in third gear here. Lifting is enough, but you want to get that rotation so that as you approach this next corner, you can get on the throttle really early. So basically, as soon as that curb starts, you can get back on the throttle, take a lot of that curb, including the concrete, and really just hammer through this thing super fast, which is really fun. This next corner, full blast. You saw I took a lot of grass. You don't get an off track there. I was probably pretty close, but it allows you to get through there. As we approach here, this is back down to third gear. Again, you're going to want to carry a lot of speed. Skippies want to move forward, right? Momentum is king in these cars, so you want to maintain as much forward momentum as possible. So I find that like lifting is generally enough, maybe grazing the brake just a little bit. I'm talking like 5%, just to get a little bit of the turn in started. You don't really have to slow the car down. Shifting down into third is enough to get that turn in to start happening. And again, it's going to start early. You're going to do it right when you sort of approach this curb, point the car, take a lot of this next apex curve and just power through it. You've got a decent amount of space for the exit here, and carrying a lot of speed is the key there, because again, you're coming through sort of a set of switchbacks that are fast, and you want to continue that level of momentum through here. This next chicane, it's blind, which makes it tricky. A little bit of muscle memory to figure out how to get through it, but once you sort of know it, you just do it every time. It's not overly complex. You don't need a lot of width here. I probably went a little too wide here. You can stay a little tighter. That first one is full out. There's no reason to even worry about it. As far as sort of the blind one next, that's going to be a tricky one. So I kind of look at those trees up ahead, the cluster on the sort of straight ahead of us right now, and kind of point to the rightmost tree. You can also start to think about it as sort of, as this curve ends, you start turning in. You don't want to turn in too tight, because while there is a lot of curb to take on the next one, if you go too far, you definitely damage the wing, and I think that's what happened to me. You will see it in a second, but there's curb, there's tarmac, and then there's cement. Using the curb and the tarmac is good. Once you get out to the cement, it's a little bit too rough. So kind of try to keep it really tight, but not all the way that you're cutting across the grass there. Again, aim for the tree, sort of take a look at where this curve ends, and start to point it to the left. Now this last turn, very tricky, mainly because it's deceiving. You want to carry a lot of speed because it's going to go uphill, there's some gamber to it, but at the same time you got this really big dip, and once you got a broken wing or don't have a broken wing, hitting that dip can still break the wing. So what we want to take a look at is sort of slowing down earlier, and again carrying our momentum, so slow down, coast through that dip, and then point our car to where we want to go and start to accelerate early, because next we have a really long straightaway, right? So we don't want to botch the exit of this. I mean, it's a very vital corner, especially if we're following someone and we want to get a good draft, or if somebody's on us. It's not that far to the finish line, so we don't want to give them an opportunity to pass us here. I take a look at sort of slowing down right before this dark patch, before that dip. So kind of do my braking at that point. That way I can let off the brakes through the dip so it doesn't compress the suspension even more. This is going to be second gear corner, so down from fourth. Get down there, let off the brakes. You can see some of the sparks coming up. My wing's definitely damaged at this point. Turn in a little bit late, kind of pointing for the inside apex here, really trying to get to that dirty part of the curve, get up on there, and that's when we're starting to accelerate out of this corner. That wall is very intimidating, but you do want to carry as much speed, and I could have actually gone a little bit quicker here. You want to carry a lot of speed so that you're basically just coming up, almost brushing that wall. And then we just fire down through to the finish line. You probably get warnings about pit speed through that point, but that's okay. You're not going to get any 1Xs or slowdowns. So that's the lap.